hindsight of growth cycle has changed dramatically over the last 5 to 6 years. We are seeing 15% growth in 3 to 5 months rather than 15% growth in 12 to 15 months or 2 years or 3 years, right? That's how fast the market is moving. There is almost 30% growth that is projected out of some of these major cities, right? We talk about Adelaide, Perth, Queensland, even the affordable cities. And so it makes a lot more sense for your deposit to go a long way, right? Hello and welcome to Help Me Buy Property podcast powered by Investor Partner Group, the property investment firm that helps create sustainable property portfolios without sacrificing lifestyle. Today, we are going to decode the wild roller coaster of the Australian real estate market. We are talking about why purchasing a property to live in now is a stupid idea. Now, before we dive into this surge of house prices of our beloved big cities, let me introduce my co-host, drumroll, Cheryl. How are you today?
Amazing, Moss. Oh my goodness, you've just sent like shockwaves across all the property lovers in Australia. We love property. So what are we talking about today? And I'm a little bit nervous.
It is an interesting topic, right? And we are making a bold claim that, buying a property to live in does not make sense, at least for now, especially where the market is heading and how the market is moving. And so hold on to your hats because, the numbers that we are going to talk today is going to throw people off completely. Now,
yeah. Well, I'm going to play that we're going to play sort of good cop, bad cop type thing. And now I'm going to play the devil's advocate and ask all the questions I'm thinking most of the audience will have. So what we're saying here is do not buy a PPOR at the moment, right? I'm not saying never buy a PPOR. It's going, depending on your strategy, purchasing your PPOR is probably not the first great step. So let's dive into it. Why is that?
We have some studies that came out of Oxford Economics Australia, and what they have been talking about this surge of prices over the next 3 years, where Sydney median prices gearing to smash up $2 million. It's like watching a bidding war on steroids. Basically, that's what's happening, right? So what I want to do today is for a lot of viewers and listeners, this is a 2-part episode now. So we are going to basically talk about a lot of stuff in why things are happening and what they are doing. And then we are going to bring this all together is buying a property to live in right now a safe choice, a smart choice, or is it a stupid idea? And so it's going to be a very interesting discussion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we go, well, if I don't buy property to live in right now, when will I ever buy? And what do I do in the meantime? I think that's going to be something
100%.
In part 2. So make sure you listen to this and then stay tuned for part 2 and the reveal. Alrighty, let's get going.
So first-home buyers, and let's start there. So we are going to unpack a few things. And so the first and the foremost is the first-home buyers. And this notion of government protecting the first-home buyers, I strongly believe that dream is going to be a dream now. It's never going to be a reality because the data basically does not tie in anymore. Like Sydney never fails to amaze me. When you hear about median house price skyrocketing to $2 million by 2027, it's like we are almost living in a real monopoly game now, right? Everyone is fighting over that park place, So you talk about Perth and Perth's median price going to hit $1 million and, joining $1 million club. You talk about Melbourne. And so it's like this property market right now is this version of Avengers, instead of saving the world, they're just making everyone feel broke basically, right? And so how does the first home buyers, of course, the nervousness is there for the first home buyers. Why would they go out there and spend or pledge $1 million debt to their name when the wage growth is not happening, the salaries are not increasing by the same amount of level? All these, or, the people that you used to depend on, the parent, they are thinking about their own lifestyle, about retirement, because the age is increasing as well. So they are not handing out money, to their own kids because now they know that this money they need it for their own retirement, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. And this is right, we're seeing exactly like you said in the major cities back in the day. I know when I first bought my first property, it was 300,000 or 350,000. I'm like, oh my goodness, that is so expensive. And no one's buying that as a first home buyer.
Yes.
Now, particularly, I said the major cities where you can't, 800,000, $1 million. So it is getting to a point where for a lot of people to be able to, what this effectively means is that you've got larger mortgages, right? You've got to save up all your money for deposits. So whether it's first home buyers or not, save up a huge deposit. Make sure you got to save up for your stamp duty as well. First home buyers might get some stamp duty concessions depending, but that's a huge amount of money. Potentially if you're looking at a property that's, if we're talking about average $1 million, right? What's that? If you got 20% deposit, you got 200,000. You've got maybe another, how much in terms of 30,000 in
stamp duty? Yeah, typically 50,000 if you're looking at $1 million, right? At 5%.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes. So, that's a big chunk of money to be sitting there. And then you find most people are borrowing to almost their capacity.
Yes.
And so then you're sort of stuck in that whole race of going, I've got to pay this off, I've got to get on top of it, and you find that, if you're fortunate to have timed the market well, and I guess that we're going to talk about that as well, right? Like, one, you've got your serviceability. Two, well, to be able to access equity, you got to make sure that there's capital growth. And depending on where you're buying, you may be waiting a few years to get there. And so you'll find yourself, you're probably stuck in a little bit of limbo if you're maxed out in terms of your serviceability. And even if you had equity, so this comes down to, if you got equity, can you access it? And if you can access it, if you got serviceability, do you have enough of the equity? If you have
Definitely.
both of them, then that's happy days. But I think for the most part, a lot of people will find themselves that when they're purchasing properties that are almost maximizing your capacity, you're going to be sort of hamstrung as to what you can then further do to build your
100%.
portfolio, unless you're quite creative in how you do that. But I think the standard way is going to be a bit challenging.
It comes down to wealth creation, right? So the point that we are trying to make here is that now the question is not so much can you buy your first home or not. Well, you still can if you can borrow $1 million. But that wealth creation journey almost comes to an end, right? So how do you keep growing your wealth and think about retirement? All of that basically comes to a pause, right? Basically, that's what it is. I think one of the important things that I want to discuss also today is the news of the interest rate cut is enough to drive the market. The rate cut actually does not need to happen. Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand this notion.
Yeah.
And so let's break that up for people to, understand this. And I'll caveat this out, or I'll call this out for those who follow property markets quite religiously. We remember RBA governor coming out to the podium and saying, I'm not going to cut the rate till 2024 because this is what you can't do right now in the Australian economy. And next thing you know, the market went kaboom, like it just went bonkers, right? And that wasn't the intention. The Reserve Bank came back and started raising the rates literally like 8 to 10 months later, right?
Yeah. And
the human mentality and mindset is that, if I tell an employee today that I'm going to increase your salary by, say, $40,000, okay, they'll go out there, buy an expensive perfume, book a holiday, dine out and do something nice with the kids. They'll do all of these things, and they haven't seen the money hitting the bank account yet, by the way. And imagine like that 30,000 is going to come through over the year. So they've spent 30,000 on a holiday right now, thinking mentally that, okay, I'm going to make that money. In certain cases, they actually go overboard. So instead of getting 30, they go out and spend 50 because naturally, that's the human mindset. That's how, unfortunately, the sentiments work. And so typically when I say that the news of the rate cut would do a lot more than the actual rate cut, basically, this is what I'm referring to. So it's a very interesting dilemma at play. So yeah, when you look at the bigger scheme of things, typically, when you look at the dilemma in the bigger scheme of things, it's a main driver on driving the property prices typically as well. When you hear Oxford, talking about some of these prices hitting 30% over the next 3 years, well, of course they can because of some of these factors.
Yeah. And so what doesn't that mean? It highlights to me, people are probably going, well, if the house prices are going up, isn't it a good time for me to buy then?
Yes. Yes, and I don't disagree. I think the house prices are going to go up and it is definitely a good time to buy. The question almost always comes down to buy what?
Yes.
Should I buy a place to live in or should I buy a place to invest, right?
Yes.
And we'll bring this conversation again at the very end, talking about all of these things as to, okay, which direction do we need to take? I think unpacking some of these things are quite relevant in today's time.
Yeah.
One more question, and I think this is for you, Cheryl. Why do you think that RBA will cut the rate? Everyone is talking about the rate cuts, right? And, everyone inevitably believes that RBA will do the rate cut. You talk to anyone in property industry today, that people know that there is a rate cut happening. But RBA has never called it out. Like, there is no news from RBA at all. In fact, if you ask point blank every time, they say, well, there is no rate cut on the picture. What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. What rate cut?
Yeah.
Why do you think that the RBA would drop the rate?
Well, I think that the reason why the RBA was not thinking, I mean, we know that the RBA was raising the interest rates because you've got a whole lot, there's not that wage growth was increasing. Inflation was an all-time high. And I think there's a large part of that being going, well, we're all this sort of growth and activity and all that, they were wanting to sort of put a level of control over it. And we're at this point now where you are finding that wage growth isn't happening. Inflation has come back down quite a lot. People are losing jobs as well. And people are losing jobs, but they're also defaulting on their loans. People are selling houses because the rate's gone up so much that people are coming off their fixed interest rates, their honeymoon rates, and they're getting slammed pretty hard. I mean, some people almost more than double the amount of what they were initially paying. If they weren't prepping themselves for it, they'd be hurting a lot, right?
Definitely.
So I think that's where the RBA is starting to see we've got to pull back a little bit, and I think that's where people are also hoping.
Yeah.
Because I don't think this particular economy and in terms of how people are financially strained, and we can see it. You're not doing anything.
Definitely.
Other industries are feeling it.
Yeah.
The tourism industry is feeling it. There's, in terms of consumers and all that, like consumer confidence is not there. And like you said, often consumer confidence is quite easy to manipulate, right? Because the media just goes, I think we need something to make everyone happy today. So let's go put out some nice news about, here are the reasons why the RBA should be reducing.
It's very interesting to hear the other side of the information. And I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, but also understand the important fact. RBA is not running an ice cream shop. They are not in the business to keep you happy. They don't care. They actually want the businesses to go bust. They actually want the unemployment to go up. They actually want people to feel pain. Basically, that's the whole activity that's been happening for the last 10 months, right? A lot of people think that RBA is their best friend and I am complaining, and if I send an email to RBA, they'll reduce the rate down. No, I mean, the policymaker actually wants that to happen.
Good luck with sending an email to the RBA and their kind.
That's a natural notion, right? And, people naturally think that, if enough people start talking about, I've lost my house, that, the government is going to do something about it. No, RBA does not care. They actually want this because that's how they're going to control inflation. They want people to basically go out and spend less. They want businesses to go broke. If you look at some of the statistics, right? 48,000 businesses have gone underwater since exactly when RBAs have started basically increasing the rate rises. That's a significantly high number, right?
Yeah.
And do you think RBA blinks an eye on it? They don't, right? Because that's what they expected it to happen. There is no doubt about it. That's where the resilience and, the sustainable property investment and, all of that notion comes in. The problem is slightly different. The problem is that, and this goes back to the history of all the policymakers when it comes to monetary policy making in controlling the interest rates and using interest rates to control inflation. They never get it right. It's like those dials where you turn it too high and the fan is too fast, and you turn it too low and the fan is too low, and they're trying to find the right balance between the two.
Yeah.
interest rate dial is basically like that. So they always squeeze it a lot more. And then there is an oh shit moment where, okay, this is way too much.
Yeah.
This is too much. We didn't wanted people, touch wood, starting committing suicide. We just wanted you to, feel a bit homeless and, so that, yeah.
I suspect you're going to get lots of comments from this episode, Moss.
But it's true. And for being on the other side of the equation, sitting with the policymakers, I've seen this time and time again, right? So the reason of the cut is typically that oh shit moment is about to happen. That oh shit moment is like, okay, I think this is enough, but we don't want to tell people that this is an oh shit moment, because if we tell people, then the market confidence comes back and all of this good work that we have done in making people suffer is going to disappear. And we don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting dynamic at play.
And what are sort of the indicators that you've seen, Moss, before where the RBA does say, okay, I think it's time to dial things back?
I mean, typically, see, when you think about from a policymaking perspective, of course, there are some qualitative and quantitative indicators, right? They're tracking inflation, they're tracking, wage growth, they're looking at some of those things, they're looking at the number of businesses going down, they're looking at mortgage affordabilities, they're looking at people's default rates, and, at personal level. They are also looking at credit creation, how many loans are being given out. So a lot of these factors basically do come in play. But also qualitative factors, how many people are homeless, whereas how many people have dropped their income or they're doing two jobs, to support it? Where is prices of the commodities going? So a lot of these factors basically do come in. But from a layman's perspective, when you think about what are the indicators that are going to signal me whether I need to go back into the market and do something, is typically around the credit creation, where you see the banks being agitated in giving the money. When you start hearing people giving 90% no LMI loans, the bank, where the interest rate and the principal and interest, the difference between the two becomes quite minimal.
Yes.
When you see SMSF, where the lending used to happen at 2% and now it's happening at less than, 1% difference between the two. Those are all the indicators that the banks are itching to give money out.
Yeah.
APRA is ready to basically, take some of this pressure off on the risk margin side of things. And RBA is basically ready to make some announcements. But again, they don't need to make the cut to get the impact. They use the media to their advantage to float some of these news around so that people don't feel a bit nervous, because the last thing that they want is for the economy to go into recession or hyperinflation. Both of them are quite bad, right? And so, it's a very tricky situation. And so another thing that really doesn't help from RBA's perspective is the population growth, right? It's madness, when you think about the population growth. There has been this, secret source of Australian property boom. All of these people flocking onto our shores. It's like we are hosting this massive housewarming party in the history, and everyone is invited, and people are like, oh, Shah, I'm going to buy another house, because this is amazing. So, and naturally, that's what's happening when you think about population growth. A lot of people coming onto our shores, they are not poor people. They are coming in cash heavy, and they're coming in with the mindset of, I want to buy a house because I'm used to owning a house, right? And, with supply low.
Used to owning a house, they used to owning an apartment the size of a small shoe, and then
100%.
I can buy a house here, like that's 10 times the size of what I could purchase. And so,
yes.
And Australia being sort of relatively stable market from a political aspect, from an economy aspect, and, obviously from a lifestyle aspect. So it becomes very, very attractive for a lot of people that can.
Yes. Again, stats, 598,000 people to date have hit Australian shores. That was last month's stat. That's crazy numbers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane sitting at the right top, even Perth sitting at the right top of, where a lot of migration is coming through. And we haven't even seen the flood of everything else right now. The tourism hasn't kicked off to the fullest extent right now, because the Australian dollar is significantly more expensive still because of the higher interest rates. So a lot of that impact hasn't even come through. We have Olympics around the corner. There's so much happening at the same time. So
yeah,
it's an interesting dynamic at play. Supply low, demand high, and demand is going to be even higher. Prices don't work, so it's only established properties that are basically available for people to play in. And the massive disparity between house prices, like this is recipe for the biggest boom Australia would have ever seen post-COVID, I think, and these are some big claims that we are making in our podcast today. Thank you for listening to us today. What an amazing episode. We talked about the first-home buyers and why the government is protecting them, the massive disparity between the brand new prices and established properties, and why first-home buyers would actually flock back into the market. We also talked about the news rate cuts and how that's going to drive the market. It was an information-packed episode, but let's wait for the episode number 2, which is us discussing in a lot more detail about why purchasing a property to live in right now is a stupid idea, but what is a better idea. So stick around, stay tuned, and come back to the second episode. Thank you for listening to us today. This is Moxin, Cheryl checking out. Adios, keep smiling, stay safe, be kind, keep investing.